A very warm welcome everyone. Today in this class we will be continuing the chapter Classification of Living Beings for class 10, which lies in unit 2 under the subject Science and Technology. Now in previous class we studied about how an organism can be classified by keeping certain characteristics in mind, such as the body organization, the complexity of the body, as well as the presence and absence of cell wall around the cell, and the mode of nutrition. Keeping all that in mind, Robert Whittaker, he classified the living being into 5 different kingdoms: kingdom Monera, kingdom Protista, kingdom Animalia, kingdom Fungi, and kingdom Plantae, the 5 kingdom system classification. And in previous class we had started to study about the plant kingdom, and we studied about the division algae. And in this class we will study about the bryophytes as well as certain subdivision of tracheophytes. Now let us start by studying about the division bryophytes. Now, when you are walking through the forest, you must have definitely seen all of these plants that is stuck in the stones, that is in the damp and shaded environments, and that all these plants lie in the division bryophytes. So bryophytes are those plants that are found in damp, shaded environment like forests and moist soils. Let us study about the body organization of the plants that lies in the division Bryophyta. So the thing is, they are multicellular. We have already studied about this in previous class. Most of the organism that lie in plant kingdom are multicellular. They have a simple body lacking true root, stem and leaves. So the organism, they have root, stem and leaves like structure, but it is not exactly root, stem and leaf. So those structure is also called as rhizoids. The structure that looks like a root but it is not a true root is known as rhizoids. The structure that looks like stems are known as cauloids, and the structure that looks like leaf, as you can see here in this plant, is known as phylloids. So the bryophyta, the plants that is present in bryophyta are multicellular. They have simple body that does not contain true root, stem and leaves, but instead they have rhizoids, cauloids and phylloids. Now another important characteristics of the plant in this division is they do not have any specialized tissue that performs the vascular function. That is the xylem and the phloem that is responsible for the transportation of water and the nutrients along the body of the plant. It is absent in the plant that belongs to this division. So they are non-vascular plants. Now you can see here I have this plant which is a bryophyte, and here you can see that in this mud inside there is this root like structure which is called as rhizoids, and here you can see that there is a stem like structure which is also known as cauloids, and the leaf like structure is known as phylloids. Now since there is no vascular tissues, that is the xylem and phloem, in this division of plant, so these plants, they do not rise much height above the ground level because there is no vascular tissue to transport the water and the nutrients to different parts of their body. That's why the height of this plant is very tiny, and it covers a larger surface area for that reason, due to the absence of vascular tissues in them. Now the mode of nutrition of this plant is autotrophic, that is, it contains chlorophyll, so it can prepare its own food by the process of photosynthesis. Now another characteristic is reproduction. Now they are dioecious. Dioecious means they have male and female reproductive organs in separate individual. So if an organism has sex organs in a separate individual, so male is separate and female is separate, then those type of organism is called as dioecious organism. Now, bryophytes also have two mode of reproduction, a sexual as well as sexual mode of reproduction. Now, a sexual mode of reproduction occurs through fragmentation or by spore formation or by gemma cup. Now, similarly, as we had studied in algae, a sexual mode, the spore formation is also another mode of asexual reproduction. So how it happens is, the spore that is produced by bryophytes, it then reaches to a favorable condition, then that spore under favorable condition will give rise to a new organism. So that is the asexual mode of reproduction. Another is by gemma cup, as you can see here on the surface of Margintia. These are the gemma cup, and these gemma cup, they can give rise to completely new separate organism as well. So these are the mode of asexual reproduction. Now let us move on to the mode of sexual reproduction. Now, sexual reproduction occurs with the help of male Antheridia and female Archegonia, and we will study about this in detail in next slide. Now, let us look at the life cycle of this plant. Now, bryophytes, they exhibit alternation of generation. So, alternation of generation means if there is an alternation between a diploid form and an haploid form. So, diploid means the genetic material is complete, whereas the haploid is they have half the amount of genetic material, that is n and 2n. If the genetic material is 2n, that is complete, that both set from male and female gametes, they join to form a diploid cell, that is it contains the complete set of genetic material, then it is a diploid cell. But if it contains only the half the set of the genetic material, then it is the haploid cell. So if there is an alternation between the diploid form and the haploid form, first of all there is an haploid form, and after certain part of the life it reaches to the diploid form, then that plant or that organism is considered to have the alternation of generation, and in their generation the gametophyte stage is dominant over the sporophyte state, because the sporophyte state cannot exist without the gametophyte state, and gametophyte state is predominantly present in most of the part of the life cycle, and sporophytic state is present only in little time in their life cycle. That's why gametophyte stage is dominant in while comparing the two types of generation. Now, certain examples of organism that lies in this division are Margintia, moss, different species of moss, Ricca, etc. Now, let us study about this alternation of generation and sexual mode of reproduction that I just mentioned in this slide. Now, we have female gametophyte and male gametophyte. As I mentioned that they are dioecious plant, that is the male and the female gametes are present in different individuals. So this is a female gametophyte and this is a male gametophyte. Now female gametophyte consists of Archegonia and male gametophyte consists of Antheridia. Now in the presence of water, this sperm from the Antheridia, they travels into the Archegonia and fertilization occurs. Now there is one important point about this division, that is the bryophytes. They are also called as amphibian plant. Amphibian because even though they are terrestrial, they are highly dependent on water as well. So because they need water to live. So that's why they are called as amphibian plant. and water is also very essential for sexual reproduction in this plant. That's why it is also one of the reason why this plant is also known as the amphibian plant. They cannot continue their generation further if there is no water present. So that's why water is very essential part of this division, that is the bryophyte division of the plant kingdom. Hence it is called as the amphibian plant of the plant kingdom. Now, in the presence of water, this sperm, it transfers into the archegonia from antheridia and fertilization occur. Then after fertilization, there is the formation of zygote. And then zygote, it divides to form an embryo. That embryo, it later gives to form an entire plant, Now, this archegonia is present inside the female gametophyte, and the sperm, it transfers into the female gametophyte, and through that female gametophyte, a mature sporophyte emerges out, and slowly the sporophyte, it matures, and inside the sporophyte spores are present, and after maturation the spores, they are released, and that spores, when they reach a favorable condition, they give rise to form a young gametophyte, and hence the cycle continue. The young gametophyte, then it again has either antheridia or archegonia, it again fertilizes, and this life cycle continues. Now you can see here this demarcation. All these stages that is present over here are the sporophyte stage, and the stages that is shown over here is the gametophyte stage, which is the dominant stage. Now you can see here the sporophyte stage only exists if there is the existence of gametophyte stage, and the sporophyte stage occurs only in short interval of the lifespan of this organism. That's why the gametophyte stage is the dominant stage, whereas the sporophyte stage is not the dominant stage in this division of the plant kingdom. Now we studied about the bryophytes, the entire kingdom bryophytes. Now let us study about another kingdom, that is tracheophytes. Now this tracheophytes can be divided into 3 subkingdoms, that is pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperm. Now let us study about some important characteristics of the division tracheophytes. Now from the name itself, we can understand that these division of plant, they contains tracheas, that is the vascular tissues that is responsible for the transportation of water and nutrients to different parts of the body. So from this division, the plant contains well-developed vascular tissues in them. That is, they have xylem for transportation of water and phloem for the transportation of food throughout the body. Now, let us talk about the organization of the body. For all the divisions of plant kingdom that we studied previously did not have a well differentiated root, stems or leaf. We studied that the algae has a thallus body, that is, it does not have root, stem or leaf. The bryophytes has structure that resembles like root, stem and leaf, but it is not true root, stems and leaves. But from this division, the plants, they have body that can be differentiated into true roots, true stems and true leaves. Now the plant that belong to this division, they can reproduce through spores or even through seeds. Now, this division is divided into 3 subdivisions: the pteridophytes, the gymnosperm and the angiosperm. They are divided into these three divisions on the basis of their body structure, as well as if they can bear fruits and seeds or not as well. So let us look at each of the subdivisions. The first subdivision that we'll cover in this class are the pteridophytes. Now you have seen these plants all over you, the ferns. That the ferns are the one of the main example of the plant that belongs to the subdivision pteridophytes. Now the basic characteristics of the plant that belongs to the subdivision is the first one, that is the vascular system. So it is the first group of plant that develop the vascular tissues, that is the xylem for water transportation and phloem for the food transportation inside the body of the plant from one part to another. So it is the first group of plant to develop the vascular tissues. It is mostly found in moist place or places that is cold and has shades in it. So it is mostly found in moist and shady places. A few examples of the plant that lies in this subdivision are, the first is the ferns, pteris and the nephrolepis, the lycopodium, selaginella. These all are the examples that you must remember that lies in the subkingdom pteridophytes. Now let us study about the organization of the body that lies in this plant. Now as I mentioned that they have true root, stems and leaves. You can see here I have two different species of fern with me, and you can see that they have true roots, they have stem and they have leaves. Similarly over here also you can see that they have roots, stems and leaves. So they have body organization which possesses true roots, stems and leaves. Not only that, the leaves that they have are very large and they have fronds in them. And when you look behind the fronds in some species, you can see there are sori which contains spores in them. Now you can see that this leaf does not have sori behind it, but this leaf has all this sori behind it. So the leaves that has the presence of sori is known as sporophyll, whereas the leaf that does not have any sori is known as tropophyll. As I just showed you in the figure that these pteridophytes, they have brown spots on the lower surface of the leaves which is called as sori, and this sori singular it is known as sorus, and inside sorus there are spores present in them. Now let us talk about the reproductive characteristics of pteridophytes. Now the plant that belongs to the subkingdom pteridophytes, they can reproduce both by asexually as well as sexually. So they reproduce by spores, that is they do not need seed for reproduction, and they have gametophyte, that is prothallus. As you can see here, this is a prothallus which is a gametophyte, and this prothallus is a free living structure which is small and it is only dependent on the moisture for fertilization. In certain plants you can see that the gametophyte is dependent on the plant itself, but in case of pteridophytes, the gametophytes, or which is also known as prothallus, are a different independent entity. So this can independently survive in presence of moisture, and they can perform fertilization because this structure contains both the male and female part in it. Now let us talk about the life cycle so that we can understand the sexual reproduction of pteridophytes in detail. Now they have alternation of generation, which I have already mentioned to you in previous class what an alternation of generation means. So alternation of generation means if there is an alternation between the haploid and diploid stage in the life cycle of an organism, then we can say that the organism has alternation of generation. And among these two generations, the sporophyte phase is the dominant one. In bryophytes, we studied that the gametophyte was the dominant phase, whereas in the pteridophytes, the sporophyte is the dominant phase. Now here you can see that we have a mature sporophyte which contains sori behind the fronds. Now those sori, they contains sporangium inside it, and those sporangium has spores in it. Now when the spores matures, the sporangium bursts open and the spores is scattered all around. And the spores, when it reaches a favorable condition, they germinate. So you can see here, this is a germinating spore, and this spore, they germinate to form a gametophyte. Now this gametophyte is a heart-shaped plant, which is an independent plant. It only requires moisture to continue the reproduction. Now this gametophyte is an independent heart-shaped plant. Now what happens is the antheridia and the archegonia. Antheridia, it produces sperm, which is a male reproductive part, and the archegonia produces eggs or develops egg, that is the female reproductive part. Now the sperm, it gets inside the antheridia and it fertilizes the egg. Now upon fertilization, what happens is a young sporophyte develops on this gametophyte itself. Now here you can see that this young gametophyte, it again slowly develops to form a mature sporophyte, and the cycle continues. Now you can see here that the sporophytic stage is present in large or most of the part of their life cycle. So that's why the sporophyte phase is the dominant phase, whereas the gametophyte phase is only present in very small part of their life cycle. That's why it is not the dominant phase. Now we have completed our study about the pteridophytes. Now let us move on to study about the another subdivision, that is the gymnosperms. Now as you can see here in the figure, from the certain examples of gymnosperms, what you can see over here and what common characteristics can you guys see? Yes, they do not have flower and their leaves are very thin needle-like structure. That is a very important characteristics of gymnosperm, which we will cover in the other slides. So the first characteristics that we'll talk about is the vascular system, because these three are the subdivision of the division Tracheophytes, which contains well-developed vascular system. So the main important characteristics of all of this three subdivision is the vascular system. So it contains well-developed vascular tissues, that is the xylem and the phloem are well developed. Now the body is differentiated into true roots, stems and leaves. But in the case of gymnosperm, the leaves are often needle-like or scale-like to reduce water loss. Now, since these plants are found in places with harsh environment, to conserve the water loss from the surface of their leaf, the leaves, they reduce in size to form a needle-like structure. So the surface area of the leaf will decrease and the water loss through transpiration from the surface of the leaf also decrease. So as to conserve the water and reduce the water loss, their leaves are needle-like, as you can see here in the figure. Now, another characteristic is seed. Now, gymnosperms are the first plant in the plant kingdom to produce seed. Now, But even though they produce seed, they do not possess any fruit, and instead of fruit they bear cones, and those cones are present instead of flowers. Here you can see that this is a cone that belongs to the plant that lies in the subkingdom Gymnosperm, and this cone is bore instead of flowers, and since there is absence of flowers, there is no fruit, that is, no fruit is formed in the plant that belongs to the subdivision Gymnosperms, but instead they bear cones, and the cones, they are either female or male cones. Now the cone that I have in my hand is a female cone. Gymnosperm produces seed, but the seed is not enveloped or enclosed inside a fruit or a seed coat. That's why we say that the gymnosperm produces naked seed. Now another characteristic is the reproductive characteristic. Now the reproduction occurs by sexual means. The asexual mode of reproduction in gymnosperm is pretty rare, but you can also see that if certain branch of a gymnosperm, if they fall down, if they have a favorable condition, they tend to grow into a new plant. So there are certain examples of asexual reproduction as well, but predominantly the mode of reproduction in gymnosperm is sexual. Now, gymnosperms are unisexual because separate males and females cone are present, and the cones are also called as strobili. Now you can see that the gymnosperms are unisexual because it only contains because one cone contains only female sexual parts, and other cone contains the male sexual parts. So due to the distinction between male and female, you can say that the gymnosperm are unisexual. Now the spore from male is transported to female for the process of fertilization through pollination by wind, that is anemophilus. Anemo means wind, philus means to love. So if the pollination is done through wind, then it is known as anemophilus pollination. Now in the life cycle of gymnosperm, the sporophyte phase is dominant, whereas the gametophyte stage is reduced and it entirely depends on sporophyte. So we can say that sporophyte phase is dominant in the life cycle of the gymnosperm. Now the gymnosperm, they are usually found in diverse environment. They are particularly found in cold and arid region as well, where the region that has high amount of snowfall, then that type of habitat contains is ideal for gymnosperm. Now some examples of gymnosperms are cycas, pinus, ginkgo, cedrus, etc. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there is presence of male cones and female cones independently, and gymnosperms are unisexual. Now, this is a male cone, which is also called as a pollen cone, and it contains pollen grains inside them. And this is a female cone. I also showed to you this, guys, previously. So, when the wind, it transfers the pollen grain from the male cone to the female cone for fertilization process, and after fertilization the female cone, it produces seed that leads to the formation of a new new plant. Similarly, these cones, they might be present in a single tree. So one single tree may contains both male and female cone, for example in pinus. But in the case of another species, that is cycas, the male and female plant are different. So this is a male plant and this is a female plant, and this part of the male plant contains spores in it, and and in presence of wind, the spores are pollinated, and if it reaches to the female cycas plant, then fertilization occurs. Now in this class, we already studied about the bryophytes and pteridophytes and gymnosperm. Now I'll ask you guys one simple question to test your knowledge about how much you understood what I taught to you in this class. So the question I have to you guys is, the plant that possesses spores and embryos but it lacks vascular tissues and seed. Now which plant possesses spores, embryos, but it does not have vascular tissues and seed? So the plant that has both spores and embryos but it lacks vascular tissues and seed. So which plant among these four is the correct answer? Yes, it's the bryophytes, because we studied that bryophytes has spores in them and that spore give rise to gametophyte, and the gametophyte, the female has archegonia, the male has antheridia, and the sperm from antheridia, if it travels into archegonia, it fertilizes to form a zygote, and then zygote gives rise to embryo. So it has spores, it has embryos, but it does not have vascular tissue in them, and it does not produce seed. So the correct answer is bryophyta. Now in this class, we studied about bryophyte division as well, and we started studying about the tracheophyte division of the plant kingdom. And among the three subdivisions of the tracheophytes, we studied about the pteridophytes as well as the gymnosperm. And in next class, we will continue studying about the plant kingdom in detail. So I'll see you guys in next class.